see him clearly is to see what I am becoming, to live a life that matters. Primary faith, the faith from which all other faith flows, is simply this: believing in Jesus as the true source of everything my soul was made to have, the glory, esteem, purpose, and rest. It's abiding in Jesus until what I ask becomes an extension of what he is asking.
Thanks for joining us on Life Journeys, a podcast about thriving through the worst pain that life brings. With global initiatives threatening big changes to our way of life, we're going to need to activate Jesus' words about mountain-moving faith. Words That Work is the ongoing series on Life Journeys that is rooted in releasing revelational words of faith that will work every time and with everyone. It's about moving the mountains that keep us from the presence and goodness of God. It's about defining our life purpose and identity through encountering him until we have the power to move the obstacles that are destroying our liberty and hope.
There's a kind of darkness that descends not from the absence of God, but from his nearness, a closeness so refining it feels, at first, like abandonment. Most of us have stood in that valley. The props have been knocked away. The energies that once kept us upright have gone quiet. The return to normalcy we prayed for seems to recede rather than approach. And in that stripped and aching place, something ancient and true begins to stir. This message is for you if you have been in that valley. It is also for you if you have not yet arrived there, because the valley is not a detour from the life of faith. It is the life of faith, tended, shaped, and ultimately released into something more fruitful than anything we could have produced on our own. Before anything else can be said about mountain-moving faith, about words that work, about asking and receiving, this must be understood. The most primary focus of faith is simply to believe in Jesus for life, for my daily life. Not as doctrine alone, not as moral anchor alone, as the living source of everything I was created to be. We have been created to live in the glory of God, and there is within each of us an inner drive toward glory and honor. That drive is not sinful. It is native to the soul. The tragedy is that it can too easily, too naturally, be sought by carnal ways and means, a reputation carefully tended, a role that gives us our sense of worth, a performance that earns our own approval. Primary faith is the discovery that all we need, every ounce of the glory, esteem, purpose, and rest that our hearts crave, is found in Jesus by grace alone. What follows from that discovery is the faith of God, a faith that lives in power over every life challenge in this world. It is what we have been called and chosen to do and to be. Living his life means far more than imitating him. He is the very essence of what we are becoming. During seasons of great physical fatigue, when I had more reason than I care to remember to wonder whether I had more than a few days left to live, my hope was deeply challenged. It was an earthly hope, a carnal hope for a return to a greater quality of life. And it was in that stripping that I began, through earnest seeking and genuine revelation, to embrace the truth that Jesus was not simply near me. He was the very substance of my being. To see him clearly was to see what I was becoming. He was pruning my branches, not punishing me, not withholding from me, pruning me, that I might find a greater reliance and a truer hope in Jesus than I had ever known. John 15:7 makes a staggering promise. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, you shall ask what you will, and it shall be done for you. But the fulfillment of that promise is inseparable from abiding. It was the knocking out of the props, the cutting back of everything else I had relied on for my very life and countenance, that opened the pathway to greater faith. I found that my faith worked more fully, more accurately, and more completely as I learned to work with what God was doing in me, rather than against it. At its root, faith is about believing in Jesus as my very life source, my hope, my fortress, and my supply of all that my heart needs. It is about the removal of the idols from which I drew my esteem, my purpose, and my sense of glory. And I will tell you plainly, it takes a truly deep searching, a genuine and sometimes painful pruning, to get to the honest answers about self-reliance. The idols we carry are not always obvious. They are often the things we are most proud of, our spiritual disciplines, our moral record, our usefulness to the kingdom. Here, the faith for whatever I ask begins to clarify. What I ask becomes an extension of what God himself is asking. Here is what emerges from that journey. The power of holiness, the power to walk away from the world, not by white-knuckling it, not by sheer discipline, but because the carnal man is no longer demanding the dying allurements of this world. He has found what he was created to live in, and the aching for glory and esteem has been satisfied in the life of Jesus himself. Every branch that bears fruit, he purges it, that it may bring forth more fruit. John 15:2. Let's talk about the idol we don't see. There's a hunger built into every human soul that we did not choose and cannot silence. It is the aching for glory, for significance, for worth, for a life that matters. We were made for it. The tragedy is not the hunger itself. The tragedy is how easily and naturally we reach for something other than God to satisfy it. It might be a career that gives us identity, a reputation we have carefully maintained, the quiet, guilty pleasure of gossip that lifts us for a moment, a hobby that has quietly become a sanctuary, a ministry ambition that has grown larger in our hearts than the God who gave it. Any of 1,000 things can function as an idol, not because they are wicked in themselves, but because we have asked them to do what only God can do. Jesus put it plainly, "For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." Whatever we have set our hearts upon will govern our lives. It will determine our prayers, our anxieties, our disappointments. It will determine whether suffering crushes us or shapes us. Primary faith, the faith from which all other faith flows, is simply this: believing in Jesus as the true source of everything my soul was made to have, not as a supplement to life, as life itself. The pruning process is how God exposes the idols we did not know we were carrying. For me, it was the loss of things I loved: hunting, fishing, the outdoors, the physical vitality I had taken for granted. Each loss felt like grief, but each loss was also a mercy, a gentle removal of the things I had, without realizing it, set between myself and God. There's a famous verse that has launched 1,000 sermons on answered prayer, and it deserves to be heard again, but in context. "If ye abide in me, and my words abide in you, ye shall ask what ye will, and it shall be done unto you." John 15:7. The promise of asking and receiving is not a standalone offer. It is the flowering of a relationship. It is what happens when a branch has grown so deeply into the vine that its asking has become an extension of the vine's own life. What we ask for when we are truly abiding is simply what he himself is asking for through us. This is why so many of us struggle with unanswered prayer. We have not yet learned that the asking must come from the abiding. We treat prayer like a vending mechanism rather than the natural overflow of an intimate life with God. But when the abiding deepens, when his word has taken deeper root, and his presence has genuinely become our daily encounter, then what we ask begins to align with what he wills. Not because we have finally said the right words, but because we have finally become the right person, a branch that has surrendered to the vine. The Apostle Paul puts it in perhaps the most startling language in all of Scripture. I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. Galatians 2:20. This is not poetry. This is the anatomy of a life of faith. The old self, the self that sought glory in lesser things, has been displaced by a life that is not our own, and that life cannot be stopped, cannot be shamed, cannot be starved. It is the life of the vine itself flowing through us. If you are weary from years of wondering why your faith does not seem to work at times, I want to offer you something better than a new technique. I want to offer you a new foundation. The confusion about asking what you will and whatsoever you speak shall come to pass is not resolved by greater faith muscle or louder declarations. It is resolved by deeper abiding. When the soul has been so saturated with his grace and his presence that the inner ache for glory has been satisfied, when we have found our significance not in our performance, our reputation, or our moral scorekeeping, but in the sovereign love of God who chose us before the world began, then faith begins to work quietly, steadily, every day. I remember a season when my family was stripped of everything. In that place of absolute surrender, when I released my expectations, my plans, and my desperate grip on a particular outcome, everything changed. In a short time, our needs were met in ways I could not have engineered. What I did not understand then, but do now, is that surrender is not defeat. Surrender is the posture from which faith operates most freely. This is the word Jesus spoke in Matthew 6. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. The promise of provision is not withheld. It is repositioned. It follows the seeking. And the seeking is not a religious transaction. It is the natural movement of a heart that has found its treasure. Desire defines our destiny. It always has. The heart that is deeply satisfied in God, not performing for God, not negotiating with God, but resting in God, is the heart from which mountain-moving faith flows. Not because it has achieved a spiritual threshold, but because it has stopped grasping for what only the vine can give. I want to tell you plainly, this is not a message about giants of faith. This is a message about your faith. The faith that works every day, not in dramatic moments alone, but in the quiet, daily encounter with a living God who is more present than our doubts and more faithful than our fear. The continued misery of a suffering life is not a sign that God is absent. It is a sign that we may not have yet found him as our great treasure. The suffering will still hurt. He never promised otherwise. But with him, nothing is impossible to overcome. The prison doors that isolation and pain have locked around us are opened not by our striving, but by our abiding. This is the revelation that attacks the darkness. This is the key. Not all suffering is intended to prune us, but it does prune us nonetheless. Colossians tells us the mystery that has been hidden across the ages is now revealed. Christ in you, the hope of glory. Not Christ above you, waiting to be appeased. Not Christ beside you, offering occasional assistance. Christ in you, the vine pouring its life through the branch, fruit forming not by the branch's effort, but by the vine's abundance. He gave his life for you so that he could give his life to you. Abiding in him is not a discipline to be mastered. It is a life to be received, a life he is eager to give, a life that will fulfill every word he has spoken, A life in which what you ask becomes an echo of what he himself is asking, and the answer is already on its way. So under the pruning shears, don't try to gut it out and remove the dead branches by willpower. Find the treasure of his grace where the cut is being made and live in faith. It's not about the faith to remove the shears. It's about removing what's been holding you back. You were made for glory. You will find it here. Abide.
You can unlock the presence of God in your life. There are revelation principles that remove the mountains, keeping us from joy, hope, peace, and purpose when our world gets turned upside down. Look for these words that work with Pastor Hardika as he shares what has helped him when life got hard. And don't forget to check out his book, The Fortress and the Firebrand, available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Thanks for listening to Life Journeys.
To see him clearly is to see what I am becoming, to live a life that matters. Primary faith, the faith from which all other faith flows, is simply this: believing in Jesus as the true source of everything my soul was made to have, the glory, esteem, purpose, and rest. It's abiding in Jesus until what I ask becomes an extension of what he is asking.